Hi guys, so today's video is going to be using the Oddball Stampin' Bella Witch, which I stamped and then coloured in with some Copic markers and cut with my Brother Scan and Cut. I then have the scalloped, outside in stitched scalloped rectangle, the largest one from Lawn Fawn, and also the Hero Arts Cloudy Moon fancy die. I thought that worked really well, so I've die cut that out, and I'm going to be using Ranger Oxide ink in a couple of colours, not traditional colours for a background or for a sky theme, but I thought it worked really well and it coordinates with my witch. And I've also got some vintage photo which I'm using on just about everything. So first of all, I'm going to stamp the sentiment and cut that out very simply. I'm going to use some Versamark ink. I've used a powder tool so that the embossing powder only sticks to the ink, and I'm going to stamp that and then put some Nouveau. I had like a lilac-y colour and I thought it would work really well, and it did. It worked really well on the black cardstock. So it's just a hint of purple, but it's not sort of super dark, so you can still read it. So I thought I'd use that, and of course it says, "You say witch like it's a bad thing." So I love things like this, and I love this Oddball, all the Oddball stuff, whether it's themed for, you know, Halloween or Christmas or whatever it is. I love them all. I think they're so cute, and they're sort of, the artwork is kind of up my alley, so it works. So what I'm going to do is just trim that very simply, so that I get sort of like a block of sentiment, if that makes sense. So I'm just using a Tim Holtz trimmer here. You can use any trimmer you like. You can use a pair of scissors if you can cut straight. I cannot, so a trimmer is definitely what I would choose to use, and it's very simple to cut them out, and I just cut until I was happy with the spacing around the sentiment. So I'm going back in here just to trim it so that I feel like it's almost in the center of that block. So this is super easy to do. If you have some dies that will cut out a round stencil around your stamped image, then that works too. So this is the I think this is the Crawford and Black watercolor paper, and I got this is super cheap. I got this from the Works, and I thought I'd give it a whirl here today, and it worked pretty well. I was quite impressed actually. Some watercolor papers just don't work very well, but some of them do, especially if they're a cheaper brand or a cheaper type of cardstock. They don't always work the way that you sort of hope that they will. So I was quite impressed with this. So I'm just taking the Wilted Violet and Mowed Lawn and just blending them together. So you get this sort of funnier colour when they blend together in the middle, which I actually really like. So it worked really well for me. But it's not your traditional background colours for a sky. So sometimes you have to try these things. And I used the colours that were in my stamped image, the colours that I'd coloured her dress in, and I think it was something on her hat as well, the band on her hat. So I've got a distress sprayer here, and I'm just spraying it with water, and I kind of oversprayed there, so I decided to take the ink daubers, once I've dried it, take the ink daubers again, and or foam blending tools, whatever you call them, without re-inking them, and just going over the top, and it just mutes the white of this, the splatter down. So if you don't want that sort of bright white, and also I'd pulled too hard on the trigger, so it sprayed too much, so it created way too much white space. So I've got some very old Cosmic Shimmer watercolor paints, and these are very shimmery, and I'm just going to use, one's the lavender and one's the black night, I think it's called, or something like that. I'm sure I would have shown you the colours there. The black seemed to absorb the water, so maybe they are like on their way out. But I've had these for about 11 years, so they are very old. And I'm just going to use a paintbrush and just splatter the background. Bear in mind, this will, when you do this, if you don't have a splatter box, or something that you've put in the background on your, on your works, it will get everywhere. I literally cleaned the desk and up the, I have like a vase thing that I use for my camera, and it was everywhere. So just bear that in mind. But it does create some very cool effects on your background. Now, I didn't want to use paper towel to take up the moisture, because I want the colour to stay there. So here I'm cleaning up like crazy, and you'll see I got cleaning everything else around it. I wanted that to stay as that colour, so I didn't want to use a paper towel to pick up the moisture, so I left it like that and just dried it with my tool gun. If you have time, you can always leave this just to air dry and you'll get a similar effect. Obviously the paper won't warp as much if it air dries. This warped obviously a little bit because it's, you're speeding up that process. And there's hopefully you can see some of the shimmer. The black watercolor paint also has a shimmery, it's all shimmery, all that set. And I decided that I would leave that as it was. I loved how that looked, so I'm just going to stick this onto the background. I also had cut the background, the watercolor paper. I'd also done a bit of not difficult maths, but I just cut the page, that piece, so that it would fit within the scallop. So I knew that I didn't have to worry about trying to trim the edges or anything like that, because obviously with the scallop you're going to find it's going to be more difficult to trim that edge. You can't obviously trim it straight. So I just stuck that straight down there, and I thought that looked pretty cool. And of course I have to vintage photo everything, so especially at Halloween, and it does make a massive difference. And so I'm going around the edges with it, and then I will also go around the edges of my little witch and also the card base. Obviously the sentiment doesn't need it, it's black, you're not going to see it on there. You can go around there, but you're not really going to see it. In fact, you're not going to see it because it's black cardstock, but you could, if you feel better about it, then do that. And even the white spaces behind her, I sort of went over that a little bit just so it wasn't so stark white. And then around the card base, this is, I think this is Granny Apple Green Stampin' Up cardstock. And so I'm just going to, it's a standard A2 size card, and I'm just going to now stick this flat. I was going to put some foam adhesive on it, and I just decided to go and put it on there flat. I will sort of use some foam adhesive on the back of her and the sentiment, which you'll see in a second. And that's pretty much it. That's as complicated as this card gets. So I'm just going to put some foam adhesive on the back of her, and yes, 10 million pieces of foam, because that's how I do things. I don't like the idea that my stuff's going to fall apart. Like if you mail it, which I'm terrible at doing, everybody knows that, but if you mail it or something like that, you don't want it to fall apart, and I just have this fear that it's going to, so I stick like 50,000 foam dots on, use adhesive till it comes out of my ears all over it. So yeah, and even the tiny bits, I'm just trying to get in the little areas. So on the sentiment, it's above the card there, I've put foam adhesive on one side where it will, and flat adhesive, if you like, on the other side of it, and that's because where the flat adhesive is going to be laying on top of her, so you don't want to put foam tape on that bit. She's already popped up, so to get it so that they lie flat together and flush together, then that's how you would do that. and eventually I decide where I'm putting it, and that's it. Super simple card. I really like how the purple and green worked in the background. I think it turned out really cute. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to see more from me, and I will see you in the next one. Happy Halloween. Bye.